The night I created Audrey was the loneliest night of my life. I was sitting on my second-hand couch in my tiny studio apartment, wearing pajamas I had owned since college, and drinking wine that cost $7 a bottle. It was a Friday night, the kind of Friday night that used to mean something when I was younger, when I had friends who wanted to go out in energy to join them, and the belief that something exciting might happen if I just put myself out there. Now Friday nights meant Netflix and cheap wine, and trying not to think about how small my life had become. I was 28 years old. I worked as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized marketing firm, where I spent my days scheduling meetings for people more important than me, and fetching coffee for executives who never learned my name. I lived alone. I ate dinner alone. I went to bed alone and woke up alone, and sometimes entire weekends passed without me speaking to another human being outside of the grocery store checkout line. My last relationship had ended 2 years ago, when my boyfriend of 3 years announced that he had met someone else, someone more exciting, more ambitious, more everything than boring, predictable, forgettable me. Since then, I had been on exactly 4 first dates, none of which had led to second dates, all of which had ended with the other person politely but firmly making it clear that I wasn't what they were looking for. I wasn't what anyone was looking for, apparently. I was too plain, too quiet, too ordinary in a world that rewarded extraordinary. So there I was, on that lonely Friday night, scrolling through a dating app with the kind of masochistic determination that only comes from 3 glasses of wine and a desperate need to feel something other than invisible. That's when I saw her. She was on someone else's profile, tagged in a photo, some gorgeous blonde woman with perfect cheekbones and a smile that could sell toothpaste. I clicked through to her Instagram, which was public, and found myself falling down a rabbit hole of glamorous photos. Beach vacations, rooftop parties, designer clothes and expensive restaurants, and a life that looked nothing like mine. I don't know what possessed me to do what I did next. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe it was some dark part of me that was tired of being invisible and wanted to know what it felt like to be seen. I downloaded her photos. I created a new profile. I gave her a name. Audrey, because it sounded sophisticated and elegant and nothing like Emma, which is what my parents had named me. And then I started swiping. It was supposed to be a joke, a social experiment, something to amuse myself for an evening before I deleted the whole thing and went back to my regularly scheduled invisibility. But then James matched with me. His profile was sparse, just a few photos and a brief bio that mentioned something about working in business and enjoying hiking and good conversation. He was handsome in an intimidating way, the kind of handsome that usually swiped right past women who looked like me. Sharp jaw, dark hair, eyes that were either green or gray depending on the lighting in the photos. I never expected him to message me. Men who looked like that didn't message women like Audrey. They were probably drowning in matches, overwhelmed with options, too busy with their glamorous lives to bother with dating app small talk. But he did message me, that same night. A simple, "Hi, Audrey." Your smile caught my attention. Tell me something interesting about yourself. I stared at that message for a long time. I should have ignored it. Should have deleted the profile and chalked the whole thing up to a moment of wine-fueled insanity. Should have remembered that nothing good could come from building a connection on a foundation of lies. Instead, I wrote back. And that was the beginning of 6 months of the most intense, intimate, consuming relationship I had ever experienced, with a man who had no idea who I really was. We texted constantly. Every morning, James would send me a good morning beautiful message that made my heart flutter, even though I knew the beautiful he was imagining wasn't me. Every night, we would have long conversations about everything and nothing. Our childhoods, our dreams, our fears, the books we were reading and the movies we loved, and the things that kept us awake at 3 in the morning. He told me about his family, his difficult relationship with his father, who had built a business empire and expected James to take it over. His mother, who had died when he was 12 and left a hole in his life that nothing had ever filled. His younger sister, who was the only person in the world he fully trusted. I told him about my family, too. The real things. My parents' quiet disappointment, that I hadn't achieved more with my life. My older brother, who had moved across the country and rarely called. The loneliness that had been my constant companion for as long as I could remember. The only thing I lied about was the surface. What I looked like. What I did for work. The glamorous life I pretended to live while actually sitting in my pajamas in my tiny apartment. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was more honest with James than I had ever been with anyone. About everything except the one thing that mattered most. We never video called. I always had an excuse. Bad lighting, no privacy, not feeling well. He was patient about it at first, then confused, then increasingly frustrated. But he never pushed too hard. He said he understood that some people weren't comfortable with video calls, that he was willing to wait until I was ready. I was never going to be ready. I knew that, but I couldn't bring myself to end it, because somewhere along the way, I had fallen in love with him. Not with the photos on his profile or the glamorous life he seemed to lead. With him, the person behind the messages, the man who made me laugh and made me think and made me feel like I mattered for the first time in years. The man who remembered every detail I shared with him and asked follow-up questions weeks later. The man who sent me songs that reminded him of me, and articles he thought I would find interesting and random photos of sunsets, because he knew I loved them. James fell in love with Audrey, and I fell in love with James, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that both of those loves were doomed. The end came on a Monday morning. I arrived at work early, the way I always did, hoping to get a head start on the pile of administrative tasks that never seemed to shrink. The office was buzzing with unusual energy, people clustering in groups, whispering, glancing toward the executive conference room with expressions of nervous excitement. "Did you hear?" My coworker Rachel appeared at my desk, practically vibrating with gossip. "We're getting a new CEO, like today, right now. He's already in there with the board. What happened to Mr. Patterson? Retired. Suddenly. Over the weekend. Everyone's saying he got pushed out." Rachel leaned closer. "And the new guy? Apparently, he's young. Like, really young. And really hot. Lindsay from accounting saw him walk in and almost fainted." I didn't care about the new CEO. I had more pressing concerns, like the fact that James had texted me late last night, saying he had a big day today, something that could change his life, and I had been too tired to ask what he meant. But I smiled at Rachel and pretended to be interested, because that's what I did. I pretended about everything. The meeting ended an hour later. The board members filed out first, looking satisfied, and then the door opened one more time and I saw him. Time stopped. I don't know how else to describe it. One moment I was sitting at my desk, pretending to work on a spreadsheet. The next moment, the world had ceased to exist, and there was only him, the man from the photos, the man from my messages, The man I had been lying to for 6 months, standing 30 feet away from me in a suit that cost more than my annual rent. James. His real name, I would later learn, was James Blackwood. As in Blackwood Industries, as in one of the largest private equity firms in the country, as in the son of the billionaire founder who had just handed over the reins of his empire to his only heir. He looked different in person. More real, somehow. More overwhelming. The photos hadn't captured the way he carried himself. The quiet authority in his posture. The intensity in his eyes. The way the air seemed to rearrange itself around him wherever he walked. He was talking to one of the board members, nodding at something she said, his expression polite but distant. Professional. In control. And then his gaze swept across the office, passing over the desks of assistants and junior staff, passing over faces he didn't know and wouldn't bother to learn, passing over me like I wasn't even there, because to him, I wasn't. I was nobody. A face in the crowd, just another administrative assistant in an office full of people who existed to support his vision. He had no idea that the woman in the frumpy cardigan with the glasses and the messy bun was the same person who had told him her deepest secrets at 2 a.m, the same person who knew about his mother's death and his father's expectations and the private fears he never shared with anyone else. The same person who had been lying to him from the very first message. I don't remember the rest of that morning. I must have worked. I must have answered emails and scheduled meetings and done all the things I was paid to do. But my hands were shaking and my heart was racing, and my mind kept cycling through the same horrifying realization over and over again. He was here. He was my boss. And he had no idea who I was. That night, James texted me. Audrey, I should say. He texted Audrey. Big day. Got the promotion I was hoping for. Wish you could have been here to celebrate with me. I stared at the message for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to respond. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. Tell me everything. And he did. He told me about the company he was now running, a company he never named, because he was always careful about those details. He told me about the employees he had met, the challenges ahead, the pressure of living up to his father's legacy. He told me he had walked through an office full of people and felt completely alone, and that talking to me was the only thing that made him feel connected to something real. I read that message in my tiny apartment, wearing my pajamas, crying quietly into my $7 wine. The next 6 weeks were torture. By day, I watched him from across the office, watched him stride through hallways with purpose, command meetings with quiet authority, transform the company with decisions that were decisive and sometimes ruthless, but always, always effective. He was brilliant. Everyone could see that. The kind of leader who inspired loyalty and fear in equal measure. He still didn't know my name. I was just the assistant, or the girl who handles the scheduling, or most often, nothing at all. Just a shadow in his peripheral vision, invisible the way I had always been invisible. By night, I was Audrey, his confidant, his comfort. The woman he was falling more deeply in love with every day. The guilt was eating me alive. I think I'm in love with you, he texted one night. I know that's crazy. I know we've never met in person. But I've never felt this way about anyone. You see me, Audrey. The real me. Not the name or the money or the expectations. Just me. I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to confess everything. Throw myself on his mercy, beg him to understand that the feelings were real, even if the face was fake. But every time I tried to form the words, I imagined his reaction. The betrayal, the disgust, The realization that the woman he loved didn't exist. So I said nothing, and the lie grew larger every day. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the copy room, alone, trying to fix a paper jam in the printer that had been driving everyone crazy all week. The door opened behind me, and I heard footsteps, and then a voice that made my entire body go cold. "Need some help with that?" I turned around, and there he was, James Blackwood, CEO of the company, standing 3 feet away from me with a half-smile on his face. He was looking at me. Actually, looking at me, for the first time since he had arrived. I'm fine," I stammered, my heart hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Just a paper jam. I've almost got it. Here." He stepped closer, reaching past me to fiddle with the printer mechanism. He smelled like expensive cologne and something else underneath. Something warm and familiar that I recognized from the late-night confessions and the intimate conversations. These older models are tricky. You have to release the tension here first. He fixed the jam in about 3 seconds. Then he straightened and looked at me again. Really looked. And my blood turned to ice because there was something in his eyes. Some flicker of recognition that hadn't been there before. "Do I know you?" he asked slowly. "You seem familiar, somehow." "I don't think so," I said, my voice coming out strangled. "I just work in admin. We've probably passed each other in the hallway." "Maybe." But he didn't look convinced. He was still staring at me, his brow furrowed, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "I'm sorry. What's your name?" "Emma. Emma Chen." "Emma." He said it like he was testing it, rolling it around in his mouth. "Well, Emma, if that printer gives you any more trouble, let me know. I'm better with machines than most people give me credit for." He smiled then. The same smile I had seen in photos. The same smile that had made me swipe right on a fake profile 6 months ago. And walked out of the copy room. I stood there for a full 5 minutes after he left, shaking so hard I had to grip the printer to stay upright. He had looked at me, talked to me, smiled at me, and for one terrifying moment I had wanted to tell him everything. That night, I ended it. Not cleanly, not honestly, not the way I should have done it months ago. I just stopped responding. James texted me once, twice, a dozen times over the next few days. His messages grew increasingly worried, then frantic, then desperate. "Audrey, what's wrong? Did I do something? Please talk to me. I'm going crazy here. Just tell me you're okay." I read every message. I cried over every message, but I never responded. Eventually, the messages stopped. I told myself it was for the best, a clean break. He would move on, find someone real, forget about the fake woman he had fallen in love with. And I would go back to my invisible life, my tiny apartment, my Friday nights alone with cheap wine, and the knowledge that I had briefly touched something beautiful before letting it go. That's not how it happened. 3 weeks after I stopped responding to Audrey, James called an all-staff meeting. Mandatory attendance. No exceptions. I sat in the back of the conference room with the other administrative assistants, trying to make myself as small as possible. He stood at the front, looking tired and somehow diminished, like something had been drained out of him since the last time I had seen him up close. "I'll keep this brief," he said. "As some of you may know, there have been concerns about security breaches within the company. Someone has been accessing confidential information they shouldn't have access to." My blood ran cold. "Our IT department has been conducting an investigation, and this morning they identified the source of the breach." He held up his phone. On the screen, enlarged so the entire room could see, was a dating profile. Audrey's dating profile. My dating profile. "Someone in this company," James said, his voice flat and controlled in a way that was somehow more terrifying than anger, "has been using a fake identity to infiltrate my personal life. They used stolen photos, a fake name. They built a relationship with me under false pretenses for 6 months. The room was dead silent. Everyone was looking around, trying to figure out who the culprit was. The IP addresses trace back to this office. The timing of messages correlates with someone who works on the administrative floor." His eyes swept across the room, and I swear they lingered on me for half a second longer than anyone else. "If the person responsible comes forward within the next 24 hours, I'm willing to discuss this privately. If not, I will involve the authorities and pursue this to the fullest extent of the law." The meeting ended. People filed out, buzzing with speculation, and I sat frozen in my chair, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to think about anything except the look on his face when he had held up that profile. Hurt. That's what I had seen beneath the controlled anger. He wasn't just furious. He was devastated. I went to his office that night. After everyone else had gone home, after the building was quiet and dark, I walked up to the executive floor and knocked on his door. "Come in." He was sitting behind his desk, his jacket off, his tie loosened, a glass of something amber in his hand. He looked up when I entered, and I watched his expression shift from surprise to confusion to something harder. "Emma, right? The admin who's good with printers." His voice was cold. "Can I help you with something?" It was me. The words came out before I could stop them, before I could lose my nerve. "It was me," I said again, my voice shaking. "Audrey, the fake profile, the messages, all of it. It was me." He went very, very still. "I know you must hate me," I continued, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I know there's nothing I can say that will make this okay. But I need you to know. The feelings were real. Everything I told you about my life, my fears, my dreams, that was all true. The only lie was what I looked like, who I pretended to be. Who you pretended to be." He repeated the words slowly, like he was trying to understand a foreign language. "You pretended to be someone else. For 6 months. You made me fall in love with a woman who doesn't exist. She does exist. She's standing right in front of you." I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. "I'm her, James. I'm the person who knows about your mother and your father and your fears about not being good enough. I'm the person who stayed up until 3 a.m, talking about the meaning of life. I'm the person who... You're the person who lied." His voice cracked on the last word. "You're the person who looked me in the eye every day in this office and said nothing. You're the person who let me fall in love with a fantasy while the real you was right here, watching me, knowing everything. I was scared. I thought if you knew the truth, what? That I wouldn't want you." He laughed bitterly. "You're right. I don't want someone who would do this. I don't want someone who thinks so little of me that she assumed I could only love a pretty face. That's not. Get out." He stood up, and for the first time, I saw the full force of his anger. "Get out of my office. Get out of this building. I want your resignation on my desk by morning. James, that's Mr. Blackwood to you. Now leave, before I call security." I left. I resigned the next morning, packed up my desk while everyone stared and whispered, knowing something had happened but not knowing what. Walked out of that building for the last time, carrying a box of personal items that represented 2 years of my life. The next 3 months were the darkest of my existence. I couldn't find another job. Word had gotten around, not the specifics, but enough. Emma Chen was trouble. Emma Chen had done something unforgivable. Emma Chen was not to be trusted. I burned through my savings, then my emergency fund, then my pride. I moved into an even smaller apartment. I ate ramen noodles for dinner every night. I applied for jobs I was overqualified for, and jobs I was underqualified for, and jobs that barely paid minimum wage, and got rejected from all of them. And every night, I thought about him. The knock on my door came on a Wednesday evening. I almost didn't answer it. I was in my pajamas, my hair unwashed, my apartment a disaster of empty takeout containers and crushed job-hunting hopes. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't fit to see anyone. But the knock came again, more insistent, and something made me get up and open the door. James was standing in my hallway. Not James Blackwood, CEO. Just James. In jeans and a t-shirt, looking like he hadn't slept in days, holding a file folder in his hands. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. He walked into my apartment and looked around, taking in the cramped space, the second-hand furniture, the evidence of a life that had gotten significantly worse since the last time we'd spoken. "I had you investigated," he said finally. "After you left, I wanted to understand why, who you really were. And what did you find? That your name is Emma Chen, that you grew up in a middle-class family in Ohio, that you moved to the city after college with big dreams and ended up as an administrative assistant because the job market was brutal and you needed to pay rent." He opened the file folder. "That your last relationship ended 2 years ago when your boyfriend left you for someone else. That you live alone. That you have no criminal record, no history of deception, no pattern of manipulating anyone. So, I'm just pathetic, not malicious. That must be comforting. It's confusing." He set the folder down on my tiny kitchen table. "None of it makes sense. You're not a con artist. You didn't try to get money from me or access to my company or anything else. You just talked to me. For 6 months. About real things. Deep things. Things no one else knows. Because I wanted someone to talk to," I said quietly. "Because I was lonely and invisible and I wanted to know what it felt like to matter to someone. Even if it wasn't really me they thought they were talking to. But it was you." He looked at me. Really looked. For the first time since that day in his office. "That's what I keep coming back to. Everything you said. About your fears and your dreams and the things that keep you up at night. That was all real. The only thing that wasn't real was the photo. I know it doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't." He was quiet for a long moment. "But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. About Audrey. About the fact that I fell in love with someone's words and thoughts and soul, and now I can't figure out how to unlove them just because the face is different." My heart stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to trust you. I don't know if I can ever look at you without remembering the lie." He stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell that expensive cologne again. "But I also don't know how to walk away, because the person I fell in love with is standing right in front of me, and she's not a fantasy. She's real. She's here, and I still want to know her. James, can we start over?" His voice cracked. Not from the beginning. I don't think we can pretend none of this happened. But from here, from the truth. Can you give me that? I looked at him. This man I had wronged so terribly, this man who had every right to hate me, this man who had somehow found his way to my door anyway, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. My name is Emma Chen, I said, extending my hand. I'm 28 years old. I work. Well, I used to work. In administration. I live alone in a tiny apartment, and I drink cheap wine, and I spend too much time on dating apps because I'm desperately lonely. And 6 months ago, I did something terrible that I will regret for the rest of my life. He took my hand. James Blackwood, 32, CEO of a company I never really wanted to run. Terrible at relationships, because I never learned how to trust. And 6 months ago, I fell in love with a woman I'd never met. And I'm starting to think I might want to fall in love with her all over again. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't fall into bed or make grand romantic gestures. We just sat on my second-hand couch and talked. Really talked, face to face, with no screens between us. Until the sun came up. It wasn't easy. Nothing about us was easy. He struggled to trust me. I struggled to believe I deserved him. We fought about the lie. About the months I had let it continue. About the damage it had done to both of us. There were nights when I was sure it was over. Sure he would finally realize that I wasn't worth the effort. But we kept coming back to each other. Kept choosing each other. Even when it was hard. He rehired me 3 months later, not as his assistant, but as a coordinator in a different department, where I could prove myself on my own merits. I worked my way up slowly, refusing any special treatment, earning every promotion through sheer determination. He proposed 2 years after that first night on my couch. I fell in love with your words before I fell in love with your face, he said, down on one knee in the tiny apartment where I no longer lived, but that he had rented out just for this moment. I want to spend the rest of my life hearing both. I said yes. We were married in a small ceremony, just family and close friends. I wore white, and he wore a suit that fit perfectly, and when I walked down the aisle, he looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. And maybe that's the real ending of this story. Not that he forgave me, or that we fell in love, or that we got our happily ever after, but that he finally saw me, really saw me, Emma Chen, not Audrey or a fantasy or anything else, and decided I was worth loving anyway. That was 3 years ago. Now we have a house in the suburbs and a dog named Pixel, and a baby on the way. We still argue sometimes about the lie. He brings it up when he's feeling insecure. And I apologize again because I'll never fully stop apologizing. But mostly we laugh about it. About the absurdity of how we met. About the fake profile that accidentally led to something real. Do you ever regret it? He asks me sometimes. Usually late at night when we're lying in bed and the world is quiet, catfishing you. All of it. The lie. The mess. The months of pain we went through to get here. I think about it every time he asks. Really think about it. No, I always answer. Because it led me to you. And you're worth every terrible thing I had to go through to find you. Even losing your job. Even that. Even the 3 months of ramen noodles? Okay, maybe not that. That ramen was disgusting. He laughs and pulls me closer, and I think about how strange life is. How the worst decisions can lead to the best outcomes. How love can grow from lies, if you're brave enough to tell the truth eventually. The man I catfished for 6 months showed up at my job. He became my boss. He discovered my lie. He broke my heart, and I broke his, and somehow, impossibly, we put each other back together. Some love stories start with a meet cute. Ours started with a fake profile and cheap wine, and a loneliness so deep I thought I would drown in it, and it ended with this. With him, with us, with a love built on truth after months of deception. It's not the story I would have written for myself, but it's the story I got. And I wouldn't change a single word,